Welcome back to the Mormon News Roundup. I'm your host, D-Days, and that's talent on loan from Kolob. Today, we're diving into the controversial yet crucial topic, the top 10 failings of Joseph Smith Jr. as a religious leader. Joseph Smith is the founder of the Mormon Church, and he is a figure of great historical significance, but his life and actions have been subject to much scrutiny and debate. In this episode, we'll explore some of the most significant failings attributed to him. Let's get started.
You fail!
First on our list is Joseph Smith's practice of marrying underage girls. One of the most notorious cases is his marriage to 14-year-old Helen Mar Kimball. This practice has raised serious ethical and moral questions and remains a point of contention for many within and outside the church. Critics argue that such marriages were exploitative and have no place in a moral religious tradition or society.
Helen Mar Kimball was only 14 years old when Joseph married her. Many people believe that there is no evidence for sexual intimacy. And to some degree, this is true. She didn't say that they had sex, and neither did Joseph. She also never said that she did not have sex with Joseph Smith. However, she did say a few things that would lead one to believe that sex was indeed a part of their relationship. The following 3 quotes all come from her personal writings.
It was revealed that there were thousands of spirits yet unborn, who were anxiously waiting for the privilege of coming down to take tabernacles of flesh, that their glory might be complete, which makes this plural wife system an actual necessity.
She also wrote,
"The principle was established by the prophet Joseph Smith, and all who have entered into it in righteousness have done so for the purpose of raising a righteous seed, and the object is that we may be restored back to that Eden from whence we fell."
And this last quote is probably the most problematic.
"I would never have been sealed to Joseph had I known it was anything more than ceremony. I was young, and they deceived me by saying the salvation of our whole family depended on it."
Helen Mar Kimball understood that the purpose of polygamy was to give tabernacles of flesh to the spirits yet unborn, and to raise up a righteous seed. And she herself said that her marriage to Joseph was more than ceremony.
Nasty. You fail!
Next, we have Joseph Smith's dishonesty with his wife Emma regarding his multiple marriages. Smith practiced polygamy in secret, often lying to Emma about his intimate relationships with other women. This deception not only caused immense personal strife for Emma, but also potentially undermines Smith's integrity as a religious leader.
On May 28th of 1843, Hiram Smith sealed Joseph Smith to his legal wife, Emma Hale Smith. If Mormon historian Todd Compton's dates are correct, then this would make Emma roughly the 26th wife sealed to the prophet. And it wasn't until 6 weeks and a few more wives later that Hiram tried to convince Emma of the correctness of the spiritual wifeism.
He's lying!
You fail!
The third point is the financial disaster of the Kirtland Safety Society. Smith and his close associate Sidney Rigdon established this fake bank in 1837, but it quickly failed, leading to significant financial losses for many church members. The collapse of the Kirtland Safety Society damaged Smith's credibility and highlighted his lack of financial honesty.
Chauncey Griswold Webb was baptized into the Mormon Church in Kirtland, Ohio, 1834. He later ran a blacksmith shop in Nauvoo, Illinois, and went west with the Mormon pioneers to Salt Lake City, where he served as a member of the church's Quorum of the 70. He was also the father of Annalisa Young, the 19th wife of Mormon prophet Brigham Young. Webb explained his experience with the Mormon Safety Society Bank in Kirtland, run by Mormon prophet Joseph Smith and his first counselor Sidney Rigdon. Webb also explains Joseph Smith's land speculation and the failure of the bank. Webb said, "I personally lost $2,500 in that famous bank, of which Sidney Rigdon was president and Joseph Smith cashier. I got for my money the blessing of the Lord and the assurance that by and by the notes of that bank would be the best money in the country." The bank was founded in 1836. Its origin dates from Joseph's idea to secure to all the saints inheritances, which they should possess in this life and in the other. Consequently, many elders were sent east with the instruction to get as much money as possible. The elders returned with money, and Smith now bought a tract of land called the Smith Farm. The temple was built and the city lots surveyed. But instead of receiving their inheritances, the saints had to buy them, and at good round prices too. Joseph played auctioneer, and a very good auctioneer he was. The saints were full of enthusiasm, and lots went up from $100 to $3,000 and $4,000. This transaction brought some money into Joseph's capacious pockets, and he now began to think of starting a bank in Kirtland. It was to be secured by real estate, but this was never done. They went to New York and had notes engraved, beautiful notes, the finest I had ever seen. In the bank, they kept 8 or 9 window glass boxes, which seemed to be full of silver, but the initiated knew very well that they were full of sand, only the top being covered with 50-cent pieces. The effect of those boxes was like magic. They created general confidence in the solidity of the bank, and that beautiful paper money went like hotcakes. For about a month, it was the best money in the country. But the crash came soon, as everybody knows.
He ripped me off. This guy ripped me off. You fail.
Joseph Smith made many numerous prophecies throughout his life, but they failed to come true. One notable example is his prediction that a temple would be built in Independence, Missouri within his generation. This prophecy remains unfulfilled to this day, calling into question Smith's claims of prophetic ability.
I'm here in Independence, Missouri, on a spot known as the Temple Lot. And this is the place where Joseph Smith and the other early Latter-day Saints intended to build the temples, which would be at the heart of the city of Zion. Now, a question that gets asked all the time is, are we still going to build the temple here?
No.
Well, in the Doctrine and Covenants, the Lord says, Zion shall not be moved out of her place. We're not exactly sure if Zion has to be built here, but we know that the city of Zion is to us a literal concept. It's going to be built in preparation for the Savior's second coming. It'll be a place where people of one heart and one mind dwell together, and there's no poor among them.
That makes no sense.
You fail.
Another major failing is the contradictions found in the scriptures that Joseph Smith produced. We have the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price, which contain numerous inconsistencies and changes over time. These contradictions have been the source of confusion and debate among scholars and believers alike.
David Whitmer, one of the witnesses to the Book of Mormon, explained that one of his reasons for leaving the Mormon Church was that after receiving revelation through the same seerstone used to translate the Book of Mormon, Joseph Smith recorded these revelations in a book called the Book of Commandments. But later, Joseph would change the revelations as he pleased. Whitmer said, "Is it possible that the minds of men can be so blinded as to believe that God would give these revelations, command them to print them in his Book of Commandments, and then afterwards command them to change and add to them some words which change the meaning entirely, as if God had changed his mind entirely after giving his word? Is it possible that man who pretends to any spirituality would believe that God would work in such a manner?"
Changed?
You fail.
One of the most controversial aspects of Joseph Smith's legacy is the translation of the so-called Book of Abraham. Smith claimed to have translated this work from ancient Egyptian papyri, but modern Egyptologists have conclusively shown that Smith's papyri are common funerary texts with no connection whatsoever to the biblical figure of Abraham. This casts serious doubt on Smith's translation abilities and honesty.
Here are the Mormon prophet Joseph Smith's translation of images 10 through 12 of facsimile 1 versus the correct Egyptologist translation. Image 10, Abraham in Egypt. The correct translation is a typical offering stand with a spouted vessel and Nile water lily flowers. Image 11, designed to represent the pillars of heaven as understood by the Egyptians. The correct translation is a niched brick facade, originally an architectural feature, that became an artistic convention for the decoration of the dado of sacred wall scenes. Image 12, Rakiyang, signifying expanse or the firmament over our heads, but in this case, in relation to this subject, the Egyptians meant it to signify Shamau, to be high, or the heavens, answering to the Hebrew word, Shamahim. The correct translation is a stream of Nile water.
It didn't happen, he made it up.
You fail.
The destruction of the Nauvoo Expositor is another significant failing. In 1844, Smith ordered the destruction of this newspaper, which had published valid criticisms of him and his duplicitous practices. This act of blatant censorship led to increased tension and eventually contributed to Smith's arrest and assassination. It also demonstrated a troubling willingness to silence dissent and suppress freedom of the press.
On June 7, 1844, dissenters from the church published the first and only issue of the Nauvoo Expositor newspaper, which made several inflammatory accusations against the city of Nauvoo and the leaders of the church. After 2 days of deliberation, the Nauvoo City Council, led by Mayor Joseph Smith, ordered the destruction of the paper's printing press. Now, because freedom of the press is so entrenched in our society today, this understandably sounds extreme, but arguably this was done legally. The freedom of the press in the First Amendment did not apply to state or city action in this period, only federal. This changed after the Civil War with the 14th Amendment in 1868. The legality of destroying the press depended on whether the newspaper counted as a public nuisance. The Nauvoo City Council believed it did because its incendiary rhetoric arguably put the city at risk of an even greater riot. They worried that if the Expositor continued, the persecutions that they saw in Missouri would be repeated in Nauvoo, since the newspaper called for, among a lot of other things, the unconditional repeal of the Nauvoo Charter, which protected their rights. And they thought it was legitimate to eliminate a nuisance such as the newspaper that they thought could bring death and destruction to the city.
That's illegal.
You fail.
Joseph Smith's involvement in questionable legal practices is another black mark on his record. He faced multiple charges throughout his life, including fraud, disorderly person, treason, bigamy, inciting a riot, and much, much more. His frequent legal troubles suggest a pattern of behavior inconsistent with the ideals of a religious leader.
On June 30th of 1830, Constable Ebenezer Hatch arrested Joseph Smith and held him overnight before he was brought to Justice Chamberlain on a charge of being a disorderly person. Smith is said to have stolen one man's horse and another man's team of oxen. Smith was also questioned about his private and public behavior towards two young women. Interestingly, Smith was also said to have cast a demon out of a man by the name of Newell Knight. Smith's trial lasted 2 days, and after he was acquitted and released on July 1st, he was immediately arrested again and transported back to Bainbridge, where a second trial was held and he was again acquitted. In other news, on July 15th, 10 Indian tribes took part in the fourth signing of the Prairie Duen, which put into the hands of the United States most of Minnesota, Iowa, and Missouri.
You're under arrest. You fail.
Brother Joseph's repeated attempts to establish Zion, a utopian community for his followers, ended in failure. Whether in Missouri or Illinois, these efforts were met with resistance and ultimately collapsed. These failures highlight Smith's inability to create a stable, lasting community for his followers.
Zion. You fail.
Lastly, we have the prophet of the Restoration's nepotism and concentrational power. Smith often placed family members and close associates in key leadership positions, leading to accusation of favoritism and corruption. His concentration of power also created internal divisions and contributed to the eventual schism within the church after his death.
This commenter is justifying the nepotism in the Mormon Church leadership by saying that incredible people raise incredible children, so it's no surprise that these men got put in positions of authority because obviously they came from like good pioneer stock, right? The incredible person that they're referring to was Kimball, Heber C. Kimball, who forced his little 14-year-old daughter against her will to marry this old creep who was the prophet at the time in exchange for his whole family's eternal salvation. Because in Mormonism, back when it started, all you needed to be eternally saved wasn't to be a good or incredible person. You just had to trade in your children against their will and force them to marry older men. And that's how you got to the celestial kingdom. I think we have different moral standards.
Nepotism. You knew it.
And there you have it, folks, the top 10 failings of Joseph Smith as a religious leader. While his contributions to the founding of the Mormon Church are undeniable, these significant shortcomings provide a more nuanced understanding of his legacy. It's important to examine historical figures with a critical eye to fully appreciate their impact, both positive and negative. Thanks so much for watching the Mormon News Roundup. If you feel like you can contribute to this show, please visit our Patreon. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay informed and stay curious.